this has been one case that has had South Africans talking. This is the case against bogus Dr. Matthew Lani. We know that it was dropped due to a lack of evidence. He is now threatening to sue Gauteng Health. This while some law experts believe that Lani does have a case to answer to. Let's discuss this with social media legal consultant Lerato Mtwampe. A very good morning to you, Mr. Mtwampe, and thank you for your time today. I think a lot of South Africans have been left quite baffled by the results that came out of the Joburg Magistrate Court when Matthew Lani was allowed to walk out. The charges dropped, and basically what was said is that lying is not against the law. What impact does this actually have on people impersonating others on social media, whether you are impersonating a doctor or a policeman or another medical professional or professional in any sphere?
Yeah, good morning, Tammy. I think, this case is quite unique because it's online impersonation, and online impersonation effectively is a fraud case. And in order for you to prove a fraud case, you need to prove 4 elements. So you need to prove that there was intention. You need to prove that the conduct of the person was unlawful. You also need to prove that there was prejudice and potential harm that was caused to the people that he was prescribing medication to, or either, giving medical advice to. And you also need to prove misrepresentation. So of all the 4 elements that I've named, the one that is necessarily missing is the potential to cause harm or, potential prejudice. When he was arrested, there was nobody who actually came out and said that he's prescribed medication to me, he's given me medical advice. He was essentially, arrested in a sort of trespassing kind of thing. And I think that should have been the charge that they had charged him with, trespassing, because essentially him being apprehended and taken to court, for a charge of fraud, when all those elements are missing, is essentially why the charges were dropped against him. So unless people from the public come forward and say, hey, I listened to his podcast, or I listened to his TikToks, I took his advice, I bought the pills that he said I must buy, unless those people come forward and write statements on their own behalf, then this case is not going to take us anywhere.
So the Department of Health, being the ones that actually lodged this case, is perhaps the first area of it being problematic, because the only thing you are saying, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding here, the only thing that the Department of Health could have charged Lani for was trespassing on their premises. But you will remember that actually the Department of Health in Gauteng had actually featured Matthew Lani for one of their programs when they were talking about young medics, and he was presumed to have been an intern. And never at any point did Matthew Lani at that point say, no, I'm actually not an intern. I am making the rounds at your facilities because it's my profession. I'm an entertainer, so I'm entertaining. So when he was given, I guess that platform of being named as an intern, it's not something that he refuted. Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think that the Department of Health could have layered their argument better, or perhaps positioned it in a different way in order to get a different outcome?
Absolutely. I think there's two legislations. So he could have also been charged with two legislations. So the one is the Health Professions Act, which actually says that you're not allowed to pretend to be a doctor, and practicing without being registered is actually a criminal offense. So that could have been that charge. And then there's also a charge about lying about your qualification, and that is in terms of the National Framework Amendment Act. And that he could have been charged with. So I think they went for the high-hanging fruit, because obviously the country was watching with anticipation, and we wanted him arrested because obviously what he was doing was wrong. But in terms of the evidence that was presented, it wasn't enough. And I think that, this is when, the two parties have to come to the party, 3 parties actually. The Department of Health needs to come to the party, the Health Professions Council needs to come to the party, and even VITs need to come to the party, because of all of those 3, all of them can actually lay charges for contravening these specific legislations that I've mentioned. So I think they went for the high-hanging fruit, which was, it seemed obvious to the public because obviously they've been following him on TikTok and they've been seeing this going around. But I think, they didn't really properly do it and arrest him. And I think, he might have legal grounds.
Lerato, what about Dr. Sanele Zingelwa? Because it is his name that was actually directly used. And there were reports earlier on when this initially started that he was actually going to be laying a charge of identity theft.
From what I understand, the charges are actually been laid at Tembisa Court, and he obviously needs to also prove those things. He needs to prove that he suffered some kind of harm. He needs to prove that there was intention. And I think of all the elements, I think we can certainly prove some of them, but he needs to prove that he suffered some kind of harm. He needs to prove that, people stopped coming to his practice, people,
So can I ask you this, Lerato?
Anymore.
So, sorry, Lerato, to cut you there. So if you do not suffer any sort of harm by somebody stealing your identity, does that mean you don't stand a chance, that you don't have a case? So somebody can just go off and they can say, I am Lerato Mtwampe, a social media legal consultant. And if you don't have any negative repercussions because of that, you don't have a case. Is that what this is?
Essentially, it's a fraud case. And in terms of state cases, you need to prove all the elements beyond reasonable doubt. So if you can't prove all four, then unfortunately you don't have a good case. So your prospects of success will then be very low. So you need to be able to prove, even if it's one person, you have to prove that there was harm. If somebody, for example, has stolen your account, those people who come to you and report to say, oh, Sis Tammy, this person made me believe that it was you and I gave them money. They have suffered harm. Your reputation, your photo that was used for that profile, you have suffered harm. So in terms of that, you can definitely prove it. The fact that you reported it and the social media platforms didn't remove the content, you can show that there was intention there. You can show that, it was unlawful conduct. The fact that you only have one Instagram account, for example, you have one LinkedIn account, and now somebody is now posting on your behalf, then you have a case. But unfortunately, because it's a state case and the state needs to prove beyond reasonable doubt, it has to match all of those elements. And in this specific case, there's nobody who came forward and said, I've been administered medication by this person. This person has given me medical advice. I've lost my baby because he said bleeding when I'm pregnant is normal. So those are all the things. So those people need to come. So this thing of complaining on Twitter and thinking that the NPA is going to go there and do the whole investigation
it clearly
is
doesn't
unrealistic.
work.
People need to go to the police station.